Right now, 11 everyday items are quietly vanishing from US warehouses. From olive oil and coffee to basic antibiotics and painkillers. The news is ignoring it, and retail shelves still look full, but military logisticians are already quietly stockpiling these specific products. By the time the public panics, the shelves will be empty. Here are the 11 items you need to secure before the end of the year. The first item has been under documented supply pressure for nearly 2 years, and the mechanism behind that pressure is structural rather than seasonal, meaning it does not correct automatically when the next harvest arrives. Olive oil. Extra virgin, cold-pressed, the oil that anchors Mediterranean cooking and has become a foundational fat in American households over the past decade. A standard 33-ounce bottle of quality olive oil at major American retailers averaged approximately $7 in 2022. The same bottle averaged between $13 and $15 by early 2026. The mechanism is documented and specific. Spain, Italy, and Greece produce approximately 65% of global olive oil supply. Spain alone accounts for roughly 45%. 3 consecutive years of abnormal heat events during the critical late summer flowering and early fruit development period across the Mediterranean basin have compressed Spanish production by between 35% and 50% in successive harvest cycles. The recovery timeline is structural, not seasonal. Olive trees require between 4 and 8 years to reach full productive output after being stressed or replanted. You cannot recover a compressed harvest by expanding acreage next spring. United States warehouse inventory of imported olive oil has been running at approximately 55 to 60% of its 5-year historical average since the second half of 2025. Additionally, the disruption to Strait of Hormuz shipping corridors through early 2026 has added logistics cost pressure to Mediterranean export routes, compressing retail margin and accelerating the price signal downstream. Olive oil stores for 18 to 24 months in a sealed container, kept in a cool, dark environment. The purchasing decision for anyone who uses it regularly is a straightforward calculation. Build a position now at current pricing, or build it later at higher pricing after the next wave of supply reduction completes its path to the retail shelf. The second item catches people off guard consistently because it has been one of the most reliably available proteins in American grocery stores for decades. Canned sardines and canned anchovies. The small, shelf-stable, calorie-dense canned fish that military logistics planners specifically include in field ration design because of their exceptional nutritional density relative to cost, weight, and storage requirements. The Pacific sardine fishery, which supplies a significant portion of canned sardine products in American retail markets, has been under regulatory closure or severe restriction intermittently since 2015 due to population decline driven by sustained ocean temperature increases. The Atlantic sardine supply has compensated partially, but demand pressure on Atlantic supply has pushed pricing consistently upward for several years. Current warehouse inventory data for canned sardines and anchovies shows a measurable compression pattern across major United States distribution centers. The category is not in crisis, it is tightening. The number of product varieties available in major retail formats has declined by approximately 30% from peak variety levels in 2019. Fewer producers, fewer format options, less buffer inventory in the distribution chain. A standard can of sardines delivers approximately 230 calories, roughly 23 grams of protein, and a fat profile centered on long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. No other canned protein available at a comparable price point delivers that specific combination of caloric density, protein concentration, and anti-inflammatory fat quality. Military nutrition programs classify this category as nutritionally irreplaceable for extended field scenarios, precisely because no functional equivalent exists at the same cost. The combination of structural supply pressure, nutritional uniqueness, and expanding civilian demand from the preparedness community has made this one of the items that informed buyers have been quietly building positions in for the past 12 to 14 months. Number 3 is the item that nearly every basic preparedness guide overlooks entirely, and the oversight has a specific, documented, physiological consequence that does not become apparent until the supply is actually absent. Iodized salt. Not salt. Iodized salt specifically. The distinction matters for a reason most people have never had to think about. The thyroid gland requires iodine to produce the hormones that regulate metabolism, body temperature, cardiovascular function, and cognitive performance. Iodine does not occur naturally in most inland food sources at adequate concentrations. For the majority of the American population, iodized table salt is the primary dietary source of iodine. The supply chain situation affecting iodized salt is not a shortage of sodium chloride. Salt is abundant. The constraint is in the iodization additives, potassium iodate and sodium iodide, used in the fortification process. Both compounds are produced in significant quantities by a small number of specialized chemical manufacturing facilities. When those facilities face disruption, the buffer absorbs the pressure invisibly before any retail signal appears. A pattern consistent with this dynamic occurred in 2023, when production disruptions at a major potassium iodate facility compressed the global supply of the iodization additive by an estimated 22% for approximately 8 months. No mainstream preparedness publication covered it. The buffer held. The rebuild was slow and incomplete. Military ration systems explicitly include iodine supplementation because operational nutrition planners understand that any extended scenario without access to iodized salt will produce measurable thyroid and cognitive effects within 4 to 8 weeks in adults and faster in children. A 25-pound bag of iodized salt from a restaurant supply retailer costs approximately $8 and stores indefinitely in a sealed, moisture-proof container. It is one of the lowest-cost, highest-consequence preparedness purchases available at any budget level. The fourth item represents a category where the supply compression is verifiable by any family member who has tried to fill a prescription in the past 18 months. Amoxicillin and related penicillin-class antibiotics in the civilian medical supply chain. The United States Food and Drug Administration maintains a publicly accessible drug shortage database. As of early 2026, that database lists multiple presentations of amoxicillin, amoxicillin clavulinate combinations, and related penicillin-class derivatives as being in active shortage or shortage-adjacent allocation status at the wholesale level. The underlying mechanism is structural and unlikely to resolve quickly. Approximately 75 to 80% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients used in generic antibiotic manufacturing for the American market originate from production facilities in China and India. A concentrated set of facilities produces the majority of this active ingredient volume. Regulatory compliance actions, facility shutdowns, raw material constraints, and manufacturing consolidation have created an active ingredient pipeline that operates with minimal buffer against disruption. Building domestic active pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturing capacity at the required scale takes years of capital investment and regulatory process. The structural vulnerability is known, documented, and not close to resolution. Families following military-style medical preparedness protocols do not speculatively stockpile prescription antibiotics without medical guidance. What they do is maintain an active, ongoing relationship with a physician who understands preparedness priorities. They keep prescriptions for essential medications current. They have the specific conversation about managing prescription timing strategically, positioning ahead of a shortage event rather than reacting to one. That relationship, that conversation, is the preparedness action. The window to have it while conditions are still calm rather than reactive is now. Number 5 moved from a premium specialty product to a mainstream household staple in approximately 5 years. and the supply chain behind it was never built for the scale of demand that materialized. Avocado oil, high smoke point, neutral flavor profile for high-heat cooking applications. Positioned as a functional alternative to seed oils in a nutritional environment that has moved substantially away from refined, polyunsaturated vegetable oils over the past decade. Retail sales in the avocado oil category grew by more than 400% between 2018 and 2024. The supply chain did not scale proportionally. Approximately 90% of the avocados entering American avocado oil production originate from Mexico, primarily from growing regions in the state of Michoacán. That supply chain has faced a compounding set of pressures simultaneously. Water availability constraints in primary growing areas, competition for agricultural land, logistics cost increases, and persistent trade policy uncertainty related to bilateral tariff and trade agreement status that was in active negotiation and renegotiation throughout 2025 and 2026. Retail prices for comparable avocado oil products have increased by approximately 25 to 35% from 2022 baseline pricing. Warehouse inventory has been running below historical buffer levels at major distribution points since mid-2025. From a military logistics perspective, avocado oil occupies the category of high caloric density fat with acceptable shelf stability, approximately 2 years sealed at stable temperature, and a cooking performance profile that functions across a wide range of applications. 9 calories per gram is the highest caloric density of any macronutrient category. Building a position while supply pressure remains at moderate rather than acute levels is a straightforward decision with a clear window. The 6th item is one where the warehouse inventory data and the commodity futures market are telling the same story simultaneously, which makes it one of the highest confidence leading indicators on this list. Arabica coffee. The bean variety that constitutes the majority of the coffee consumed in American households at retail. Brazil produces approximately 35 to 40% of global Arabica supply. Vietnam contributes an additional 15 to 20% of total global coffee volume, primarily in the Robusta variety that supplements Arabica blends at the commercial level. Brazil's 2025 Arabica harvest came in measurably below analyst estimates due to drought stress during a critical development period in major producing states. Arabica commodity futures on the New York Exchange, the market where the world's professional coffee buyers signal what they believe pricing will do, reached a 47-year nominal price high in early 2025. That futures signal preceded the retail price signal by approximately 6 months, which is the standard lag in the coffee supply chain from commodity purchase through roaster inventory to retail shelf. The warehouse inventory picture for roasted coffee reflects this compression. Buffer inventory between production and demand in the distribution chain has been running below 5-year historical averages since the 3rd quarter of 2025. This matters because coffee has a comparatively short finished product shelf life. 6 to 12 months for sealed whole roasted beans, faster for pre-ground. Meaning a thin pipeline has less capacity to absorb additional production disruption before the retail signal arrives. Unroasted green coffee beans store for 1 to 2 years with minimal quality loss under proper conditions. When the commodity futures market, warehouse inventory data, and production forecasting data all point in the same direction simultaneously, military logistics analysts treat that convergence as an actionable signal rather than a coincidence. Number 7 is a classification that military logistics has treated as a strategic material category since the First World War, and understanding why reveals a preparedness gap that is invisible until the gap becomes critical. Whole grain hard red winter wheat and genuinely whole extraction wheat flour, not enriched all-purpose flour, not bleached commercial baking flour, but the intact grain or flour that retains the bran and germ fractions with their full complement of B-complex vitamins, fiber, minerals, and fat-soluble micronutrients. The distinction is not subtle. Enriched white flour, which dominates retail availability and abundance, has been processed to remove the bran and germ fractions. Those fractions contain the vitamin B1, B2, B3 and B6 content, the magnesium, the zinc, the iron in its most bioavailable form, and the dietary fiber that supports stable blood glucose under sustained stress conditions. Synthetic enrichment replaces some but not all of what the milling process removes. Whole grain products represent a small fraction of total flour market volume. Small market share means smaller buffer inventory, fewer distribution channels, and greater vulnerability to production disruption than commodity white flour. Hard red winter wheat crop performance in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Colorado, which together represent approximately 60% of total United States hard red winter wheat production, has been below 5-year yield averages in 2 of the past 3 growing cycles due to drought and late-season heat stress. Whole wheat berries, the intact, unmilled grain, store for 25 to 30 years in oxygen-free sealed containers at stable temperature. A countertop grain mill and a 50-pound bag of wheat berries represents the highest long-term return on investment of any single food storage purchase available in the current retail market. It is also the item most consistently absent from civilian preparedness planning. This item explains a purchasing experience that many families have had in the past 18 months, without a clear explanation for what they were seeing in both pricing and availability. Lithium primary batteries in the AA and AAA format, not alkaline batteries. Lithium primary cells, specifically, the battery chemistry that operates at full rated output across temperature extremes from -40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, stores for 10 to 20 years with minimal capacity loss, and weighs approximately 30% less than equivalent alkaline cells at identical energy output. Military specification batteries in the AA format are exclusively lithium primary cells. The performance differential from alkaline becomes operationally significant at temperature extremes, during high-drain applications like continuous flashlight use, and in devices where output degradation over discharge is unacceptable, communications equipment, emergency radios, night vision accessories. The supply chain for lithium primary AA cells is substantially more concentrated than for alkaline batteries. A small number of manufacturing facilities produce the majority of global lithium primary cell output. Total demand for lithium across all battery chemistries, electric vehicles, grid storage, portable electronics, industrial applications, has grown substantially, adding upstream pressure to lithium carbonate supply that flows through all lithium battery formats, including primary cells. Retail prices for name-brand lithium AA batteries have increased by approximately 40 to 55% since 2021. Periodic out-of-stock events on specific lithium primary formats at major retail and online distribution channels have become routine where they were previously rare. Lithium primary AA batteries stored at stable room temperature retain more than 90% of rated capacity after 10 years. A 2 to 3 year supply of this specific battery format is one of the few preparedness purchases that functions as genuine long-duration insurance rather than a consumable requiring active rotation. The 9th item is one that the preparedness community has been systematically underweighting, and the reason it stays off most preparedness lists is that its connection to the supply chain pressure driving this list is not visible from the retail shelf. Over-the-counter pain relievers and fever reducers, whose active ingredients originate from petroleum-derived precursor compounds, specifically acetaminophen and ibuprofen, that the 2 most widely used non-prescription medications in American households. The connection to petroleum is not widely understood because the retail presentation of these medications gives no indication of their upstream chemistry. Acetaminophen and ibuprofen are both synthesized through multi-step organic chemistry processes that begin with petroleum-derived precursor compounds. The raw material chain runs from petrochemical refining through pharmaceutical intermediate synthesis through finished dose manufacturing, passing through a small number of critical production facilities, many located outside the United States. The disruption to Strait of Hormuz shipping corridors through early 2026 has added cost and timeline pressure to the petroleum product supply chains running through that route. Pharmaceutical active ingredient manufacturers are among the industrial users of petroleum-derived feedstocks whose supply chains carry this pressure, with a typical lag of 3 to 9 months before upstream material cost and availability changes appear in finished pharmaceutical product pricing and wholesale availability. The United States Food and Drug Administration Drug Shortage Database currently lists both acetaminophen and ibuprofen presentations across various formats as being in shortage or shortage-adjacent allocation status at the wholesale level. A 3 to 6 month supply of both medications in standard tablet format costs under $40 at current retail pricing. They store for 3 to 5 years at stable temperatures with minimal efficacy loss. Military medical preparedness protocols treat over-the-counter analgesic supply as a basic preparedness priority, equivalent to food and water. The civilian preparedness community has historically underweighted this category significantly. Number 10 represents a form of supply compression that operates on a fundamentally different timeline from everything else on this list, which is precisely what makes it the most consequential item for any family with access to growing space. Heirloom and open-pollinated vegetable seed varieties from regional and independent seed producers. Not the hybrid seed packets in seasonal garden center displays. Not commercial agricultural seed stock. The specific, regionally adapted heirloom varieties that produce seed you can save and replant, and that carry the accumulated genetic adaptation of generations of selection in specific soil types and climate conditions. The concentration of the global commercial seed industry over the past 3 decades has been substantial and accelerating. 3 corporations now control approximately 60% of the commercial seed market globally, following a series of mergers and acquisitions that concluded between 2017 and 2020. Regional and independent seed companies that maintained catalogues of hundreds or thousands of heirloom varieties have been closing, merging, and reducing variety offerings at an accelerating rate since that consolidation wave. When a small regional seed company closes without transferring its variety library to another custodian, the varieties it maintained exclusively disappear from commercial availability permanently. Not temporarily out of stock, permanently unavailable. The genetic material is not recoverable from the commercial market once it exits. The preparedness action here is fundamentally different from every other item on this list. You are not building a short-term buffer. You are building a seed library, a collection of open-pollinated varieties adapted to your specific region, stored in sealed containers at stable, cool temperature, viable for 3 to 8 years depending on species, and capable of producing its own seed indefinitely, if maintained correctly. The window to source these varieties from regional and independent companies that still maintain them is closing incrementally with every company that exits the market. It is a window that does not reopen. The 11th item explains a retail pattern that a significant number of attentive grocery shoppers have noticed without being able to name precisely what they were observing. Single-serve canned chicken breast in the individual pull-tab format. Not bulk canned chicken in large format industrial cans, specifically the individual portion size format that has become a standard preparedness and everyday pantry staple across the American market over the past decade. The production structure of this specific format is more concentrated than the variety of brand names on the shelf suggests. A relatively small number of co-manufacturing facilities produce the majority of single-serve canned chicken breast products that appear under multiple brand labels at retail. When 2 major co-manufacturing facilities serving this category reduced operational capacity or shifted production allocation in 2023 and 2024, due to a combination of regulatory compliance requirements and consolidation decisions, the effect appeared across multiple brand labels simultaneously, because the same underlying production system was supplying what looked like separate competing products. The retail consequences have been measurable. Intermittent availability in specific format sizes, price increases of approximately 25 to 35% from 2022 baseline pricing, and periodic substitution of large format products onto shelf positions normally occupied by individual serve formats. The nutritional case for this specific product is straightforward. A standard single serve can deliver approximately 25 to 30 grams of protein at approximately 125 to 140 calories, the highest protein-to-calorie ratio of any storable canned meat product available at retail. Military field feeding programs use this format for exactly that reason. It requires no preparation, no refrigeration, no cooking, no additional water. It is complete protein in the most operationally efficient package available. The supply compression in this category is not resolving. The co-manufacturer consolidation that caused it is a structural business decision, not a temporary disruption. The purchasing window is closing. 11 items. 11 independent supply chains, 11 different root causes, Mediterranean agricultural weather, Pacific fishery ecology, pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturing concentration, petroleum supply chain disruption from the Strait of Hormuz, seed industry consolidation, Arabica coffee futures signals, avocado growing region water constraints, lithium demand growth across battery categories. What they share is not drama. They share a pattern that military logistics analysts recognize from professional experience. Multiple independent supply signals moving in the same direction at the same time, in categories where buffer inventory is thin and recovery timelines are measured in years rather than weeks. The families who are positioned best when these supply compressions fully reach the retail shelf are not the ones who will react after the fact. They are the ones building positions now, quietly, systematically, 2 or 3 items per week, while the shelves still look full, while pricing has not yet reflected the full downstream impact of the upstream data, while the purchasing decision is still calm and strategic, rather than reactive and expensive. None of this requires dramatic action. It does not require clearing shelves. It does not require telling anyone. It requires a clear list, a modest, consistent budget, and the discipline to act on leading indicator data rather than wait for the lagging indicator, the empty shelf, the out-of-stock notification, the news headline, to make the decision for you. The next video in this series covers the priority sequence. Of these 11 categories, which 3 deserve your first purchasing dollars? Which ones have the longest runway before the retail signal arrives? Which ones are already past the optimal purchasing window? A ranked action plan built on the same triage framework that military logistics officers use when they are building a food position under time and budget constraints. Subscribe before that video goes up, because the purchasing window for several items on this list is the same window you have to see that analysis before the data changes again.